Hello everyone, welcome back to MLS Moves. Please make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Once we hit 5,000 subscribers, we'll be celebrating with a special jersey giveaway. 2 lucky subscribers will have the chance to win a jersey of their choosing. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're just joining the fun, this giveaway is our way of saying thank you for your support. So spread the word, hit that subscribe button, and let's reach our goal by the end of July. Now, back to the video. Well, Gregg Berhalter is officially out as the U.S. men's national team manager. The next couple weeks are going to be very interesting to keep up with and see who will eventually be the next U.S. men's national team manager, especially heading into the 2026 World Cup cycle after Copa America. I brought on Adam Turner to talk about what his thoughts were of the firing and who he expects us to hire for our next manager. Adam, the day has finally come. Gregg Berhalter is no longer the U.S. men's national team manager, torturing us, forcing us to watch Berhalter ball. No more. What do you think, man?
Long overdue. It was a really, really poor rehiring. I think the fact that USSF, went back to that well after last World Cup, and especially the stuff that happened after the World Cup, right? It was just wild that there was no vision to see that he wasn't the person that could push this team forward, right? Many of us said, it wasn't a hot take. Many of us said, hey, listen, a lot of people were like, that was terrible. Let's move on. I was more like, you know what? It's kind of status quo and what I would expect most replacement level managers to do with that team. Like any kind of average middling manager comes in and probably does a similar deal with that team. Good job getting through the group. You could have gotten grouped for sure. And that's where I do give him some credit. That tie against England was nice. Getting that win against Iran, pretty solid defensively, giving up 1 goal in the group stage. So like, kudos for that, right? I really mean that, right? A lot of people don't. A lot of people are like, screw that. That was, and I don't. I think the World Cup was good. That was a fun experience for me, and that was good. But we saw the shortcomings in World Cup qualifying. You saw the shortcomings in the World Cup, which is lack of goals. And it's like, can Gregg help this team establish an offensive identity to score more? And the answer was just no. And like, I don't understand how, especially a new guy hired, Crocker, comes in and doesn't want to put his stamp on his new job. Like, why? Like, you almost never see an athletic director like come into a job where a coach is like under fire and say, you know what? Let's keep this coach. I believe in him. Like, they always say, let's get a new guy. If the old guy is just okay and there's some controversy, let's get him out. So it was a really weird move. And it's I tried to give it, like a really open heart last year. I said that. I was like, you know what? There's nothing else I can do other than just like be open to this. Like, so all last fall, I was like, you know what? I'm open. Let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes. And it was, to me, a disastrous fall. We've talked about that a lot. Like, it was a mess. It was a total mess. Nations League was a mess with the Jamaica game. The Copa was a mess. Like, it all went exactly how we thought it would. And they made the right decision. We can talk about how long it took them, and how long it took them to announce a pretty obvious move, but they made the right decision. They got it right.
I want to point out one thing. I was talking to a bunch of people today, obviously celebrating, very excited. A lot of our fan base. There's maybe 1% of the fan base is sad to see Gregg Berhalter go, and that's apparently a troll account. We'll get into that later. But I did hear today, Adam, and we haven't even talked about this. I got some more confirmation from a source that Jesse Marsch was, in fact, going to be the manager after the debacle and with Berhalter before they rehired him. And this was right when Matt Crocker was on the job for maybe a month. He was still transitioning from Southampton to the U.S. men's national team job. And they were set to hire Marsch. Everybody agreed with it. But then a group of players, up to 4 or 5, had contacted Crocker and said, look, we don't want him, Marsch. We don't want him. We want to play for Berhalter. We think he did a good job. We want to continue the progress we've made. We believe he deserves a second chance to see this thing through and really get to, watch everything culminate when everybody's in their prime, because a lot of these players were 22, 23 years old, not in their prime yet. He deserved to coach the team when it had reached its peak. So they rescinded the offer from Marsh, who they were going to hire and who agreed to coach the team. Went back with Gregg because Crocker allegedly didn't want to rock the boat, deferred to the players because he was new to the job, and just went with the status quo. That's what I was told.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me at all. I think it's spineless leadership. I think it's really poor leadership, man. Like, if you've been around sports at all, you understand that like there are times that players are attached to coaches, but that doesn't mean the coach is the right person for the job. Like there are a lot of scenarios where you love a coach and a coach is a great person. And I think Gregg, it speaks to, I think I some people don't want to give Gregg any flowers at all ever. And I'm okay giving him a couple flowers. And the flowers I'll give him is, one, dual nat recruiting. I think I've talked about that ad nauseum. Everybody has. Some people poo-poo that, like shoo it. And I'm like, no, man, you got to give him credit. He's at the helm. Is he the lead recruiter on every guy? Probably not, but that's fine. They still have to commit to a program where he was in charge for, in some cases 3-4 more years, right? When some of those guys committed. And so give him a lot of credit for that. I think he put us in a really nice place with all of those guys that we had committed to the program during his tenure. And if you're gonna take away from what he did, which I do a lot, when things like team effort or a lot of stuff that you could blame on players, you got to give him credit for stuff too, right? And so like give him credit for that. And then secondly, I give him a lot of credit for, in a really tumultuous time in U.S. soccer, building a culture and building an environment that guys wanted to come play in, right? Not just dual nats, but the guys on the team too. And I think the attachment comes from that, right? I think, a lot of people mock it and make fun of it, but team building is really hard and really important. And I think he did a really nice job with that, because clearly those guys like him a lot, like the environment a lot, like each other a lot, right? And it doesn't mean everything's perfect, but specifically the guys you're talking about, which is most likely Pulisic, McKinney, Adams, and I don't know.
I don't.
You don't have to say. I'm just guessing. Jedi, maybe. I mean, but like whoever it was, right, are probably locked in guys from last cycle who really liked him. And did they like the fact that they were comfortable and it was easy? I don't think like consciously, but I think subconsciously that plays in here, right? It's like, I have a real, like somewhere in their mind, even if that's not what they're thinking, they're like, I have a really nice spot here. I have a really good thing going. This guy really loves me and values me, and I value him. But that matters when it comes to like building a team up from the ashes, right? Because if you create a crappy environment, if you're a different coach in that time span, might not have been the right coach. Just being honest, like through COVID from 2019 to 2021, I'm not saying he was perfect. He definitely wasn't. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of coaches who could have done what he did plus a lot more, for sure. But there's certainly some guys who have an approach that wouldn't have worked with that group at that time. And his did, right? And he established us as the dominant power in region again, which my thing is like, that's not the end goal. Like, good, cool. That is a check. Cool. Like we are the best team in CONCACAF. We've proven that. But there's all of these other little flaws right along the way that we've seen. And that's what's caused, I think, a more thoughtful and nuanced fan, in my opinion, who really follows it deeply, to look at, not just the record, right? Not just the contextless record, which involves a lot of home games, a lot of games against, 50 and up FIFA World Ranked teams, like an exorbitant amount, and a lot that he couldn't control because of COVID, and a lot he could control, and Nations League and all this stuff, and a lot of stuff he could control. So there's a lot to unpack from the Berhalter era. The thing that to me has no nuance is this second tenure was a disaster, an utter disaster, and should have been halted. Honestly, like it would have been a little bit rash, but the move I would have made is he would have been out after the Mexico game. I would have never brought him back, but like if it was like, whoa, this isn't going in the right direction. Like it's certainly I would have outed him after the Columbia game. A lot of people would say that's rash too. Like, but it's just like, this is not it, man. Like, it was never it. It was clearly heading to where it was heading. You could see that. And we needed to play drastically better than we played to make it out of that group, which is sad.
No, exactly. And, one thing we talked about, we mentioned several times, we talked about what our expectations were for this last tournament. We needed to have a good showing. We needed to prove that we could play with the big guys, right? With the best of the best. We obviously didn't do that. We got grouped in an embarrassing fashion. And one of the things that you said is that when the last time that we were in the coaching hire process, right? You were saying that you didn't want Jesse Marsh, not because Jesse Marsh wasn't a good coach, not because Jesse Marsh wouldn't have been a good manager for this team, but because you had higher aspirations. You wanted a better coach just in general. Not that Jesse Marsh was bad. You just wanted a better coach. And you said now,
Right.
knowing what you know, that you would take that Jesse Marsh over rehiring Gregg Berhalter. You just didn't know that was your only two options. You just thought we were trying to do
Right.
something bigger and better. But
I hoped. I certainly, like, listen, at the end of the day, if I really thought my opinion mattered with who they were going to hire, I would have said, sure, Jesse Marsh, just to like play it safe. But
yeah,
it doesn't matter. And my actual hope, right, and what I would do if I was running things is I would be shooting drastically higher, and I would have to miss those to come back down to the Marsh level, right? Marsh would have been my second tier of managers. He was in that second tier list to me. Like, the top tier was like sorry, he was in the third tier. The top tier is like, shoot for the moon guys. Probably not going to happen. One call and done on a lot of those. But who knows? You reach out because you never know. Because maybe somebody goes, huh, interesting. I've thought about this before. Let's talk. And it's like, holy crap. Maybe not. Second tier were the, guys like the Matarazos and the Renards. And Marsh should have been in the second tier, but I was just a little nervous about his I think tactical inflexibility, which he had showed at the club level. He had really only coached one way and been in that Red Bull system. And I just wondered, like, is he going to be willing? Are we going to spend 2 years trying to implement that and then shift? And so I had a lot of worries there, which kind of bumped him down to like, the top of like probably the realistic, the most realistic tier, somewhere between 2 and 3.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. If he had taken over, it would be way better than it is now. And I think we know that because we've seen a little bit of what he's done with Canada in a very brief spell, which, is just frankly better than what Berhalter's doing.
100%.
And you get the new manager bump. That's real, right? Guys,
Yeah.
and honestly, guys being uncomfortable, to go back to your point about the players, like, players don't know that they need to be uncomfortable, right? You think they do. And a lot of people are knocking all of our players because of this. That's just not how players are built, man. The reason coaches have to push really hard is because players, if left to their own devices, not because they're bad people or anything, right? But like, an uncoached team is going to get smacked by a coached team. And that's because a coached team has somebody driving them and pushing them outside of their comfort zone. Human comfort zone is a real thing, right? And if left to your own devices and that's why people have personal trainers, right? That's why people have, this is like not just a soccer thing or a basketball thing. Like, this is a life thing. It's like every day, right? If you don't have somebody pushing you in your job, you're probably going to chill a little bit and relax.
Oh, yeah. Kick
If
your
you have
feet
a
up.
boss who pushes you and is driving, like, you're going to go harder, and you might not always like that boss, but you're probably going to produce better. And our guys, without knowing it, needed that. And they needed, I've used this term a lot, they needed the adult in the room, which was US Soccer and Matt Crocker, to say, sorry, boys, too bad, right? Like, the fact that you don't want him is probably a good reason for us to go get him at this point.
100%. And I will say this silver lining, right? While Marsh, I agree with you. I would say he is on the fence between the tier 2 and tier 3, right? I could be persuaded either way. I could go back and forth. But silver lining, right? If we had hired Jesse Marsh, and even if he had been bad in Copa America, I don't think he would have been fired because his body of work would not have been as long or as detailed, not as detailed, but he would be more of an unknown for this national team than what Berhalter is, because we had 4 years of Berhalter before this run. So we know him, the ins and outs of Berhalter and what he is and what he does. Marsh would be still kind of an unknown. He probably would have gotten a chance to correct course and coaches through the 2026 cycle. And I don't think he would have got grouped anyways. Like he probably would have been good enough to get out of the group. Any competent manager probably would have. But here's the silver lining. I believe because of what we did, we're going to end up getting a manager better than both of these gentlemen, both of these guys. We're going to get a manager better than Jesse Marsch. So if you're telling me that keeping Gregg Berhalter for one more year is going to lead to getting a better manager than Jesse Marsch and Berhalter, I'd say in the long run, it was worth it. Putting up with one bad year, having 2 years to prepare for the 2026 World Cup, totally worth it. Because like you said, we're about to get into this. There's a lot of names who we realistically could hire for this team. And I think that it's a golden opportunity because this coach or whoever it is gets to come in for 2 years instead of 4. Low commitment as far as like they're not having to sign a 4-year deal. They get a 2-year cycle or 2 years for the cycle. They can be the savior of soccer because of how bad the last guy was. It's going to be hard to not look better than him. They can be heralded as a great coach, lead us through the World Cup, stay if they want to, which I'm cool with having a guy stay for 4 years if he's only been here for 2. It's a little bit different than having 2 consecutive 4-year cycles, right? Because he's kind of taken over a sinking ship. But this manager will have an opportunity to be the face of U.S. soccer for the World Cup cycle, maybe lead to better jobs overseas and other national team jobs. It's a rare opportunity, and I think there's going to be significant interest. The main question is, Adam, are they going to make the right hire? Who the hell is making the hire? Who's making the hire? Is it Matt Crocker? Is it the board? Who's making the hire?
Is it Don Garber who sits on that board?
Don Garber? Yeah. Is Don Garber trying to hire Steve Cherundolo as the next U.S. men's national team manager? I mean, I honestly, I don't know who. That is the thing that they need to be more transparent about. Honestly, when you make a decision like this, Matt Crocker should be doing a press conference either like by Friday or next week, answering questions, giving us some clarity on what's going on. Who's making the hire? Like, does anybody know who's making this hire? Anybody?
It's a totally fair question, and I feel like we're going to probably move on to the future here, and I'll put a bow on some of my thoughts on kind of the Berhalter era, right? I gave him, flowers for a couple things. I've certainly knocked him, if you followed me, for a long, long time for a lot of things. At the end of the day, I think I've said this a couple times in a couple places. If he just left after last cycle, his legacy would actually be pretty decent. I think there would be some detractors who would hate no matter what. But I think it would be really hard 20 years from now to look back at that era and think, oh, man, he did an awful job. What you would think is, he took over a sinking ship, helped get a lot of really good dual nats and kind of like strengthen this roster and then brought us to a World Cup and got us out of a group, when this group was young. And I think a lot of the bad would have faded. I think a lot of people have said like, oh, his era will be looked at favorably 20 years from now. I don't think that's true now. I think this last year really tarnishes the legacy, having to be fired a year in after the rehire. In all honesty, the Gio Reyna thing, which he just should have like shut up about, that was also post World Cup. Once again, like everything post World Cup has like tarnished his legacy as a USMNT manager. The stuff before the World Cup, barely getting through group stage, all that, that would have been all forgiven. At the end of the day, he got out of the group, he qualified, and he won trophies. Like it was a pretty freaking awesome. First go round. Just holistically, right? Like I didn't feel like that, so it's hard for me to say that now. But I'm just saying 20 years from now, the average fan is looking at that who wasn't like living and dying with the team every day like we do. Like they look at that and go like, it's kind of like, looking at certain NBA players 20 years later and looking at their stats and be like, damn, like is Allen Iverson the GOAT? Like what the heck? Like, it's like, man, I lived that. He wasn't the GOAT. He was really good. He wasn't the GOAT, like, and that's how, and so that's kind of one thing, right? Is like, he really screwed up his legacy. The second thing is I think that that's the moment is now to go get a guy who's going to get guys out of their comfort zone. I don't care about the language barriers. I don't care about any of this stuff that, is it a guy who's too hard on players? Is it a guy? None of that matters at this point, right? Like you've got 2 years. And when you really think about it, I haven't done the exact math, but you've got maybe like 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 camps before Gold Cup, 4 or 5. I don't know if we're doing the January thing or even counting that, but like the Gold Cup camp, maybe 6. Like what do you got, like 8 camps, till the World Cup, 9, 10? I don't know. It's not many, right? Like you've got maybe 10 camps before the World Cup, and you just need somebody who can like push dudes, right? Everybody always uses the Herb Brooks, right? USA Hockey 1980 comp, where those guys all freaking hated the dude. And like, I don't care. Like, it could be a coach that they're going to like if he pushes them. I don't care. It could be a coach they don't like if he pushes them. I don't care. Like, they just need to learn how to win, and they need to learn how to like be driven to another level together, which they haven't been.
No, exactly. And, I think that, we talked about how, this is the most important hire that they're going to make in probably in the nation's history for soccer. And you mentioned about Berhalter 20 years from now, it's probably not going to look as favorable to his legacy because of how he's tarnished it with, at least in the last, year. I Klinsmann, right? Klinsmann was people ready for him to go. But now, as time passes on, people look more favorably on him because of what he built to get these youth players over in Europe, and it's paying off. There is nothing that Berhalter's doing that's you're going to look and say that paid off. That hasn't happened, and that's the sad part. Klinsmann hasn't been the manager at him for almost a decade, and that's the last manager you can look at and say that guy did something impactful that's going to have, there's going to be things we see from it for years to come. Bruce Arena, good manager, didn't have that with him. None of the interims, and not going to have that with Gregg. So this manager he's coaching in the World Cup. Good or bad, they're going to leave some sort of legacy. Good or bad, they need to make sure they hire the right person who can lead them to the most important year of our soccer in our nation. And that I want to talk about some names of who you want to see, who you don't want to see is the manager. Now, I want to start off with who you do, because it's always juicy to hear who you want to see, right? We'll say that for last. Who do you not want to see? Who's someone rumored that you don't want to see as the U.S. men's national team manager?
I wish I could sit here and tell you that all of these MLS coaches I had like a really in-depth knowledge of. I've watched all of their teams play, not 20 times each, but watched all their teams play. I haven't broken down how they play, how hard they get guys to play. Right? When you watch like a team like how we watch the USMNT or how I watch the Boston Celtics, or like there is no soccer team other than the USMNT that I am like season pass all in. Right? I watch a lot of European soccer, watch a lot of our guys play in Europe, but I am not like watching one of those teams every single game. I just don't. Right? I don't have the time. But I'll catch 3 to 10 of all of our guys' games, right? I don't have a favorite soccer team in Europe, right? I used to watch a lot of Red Bull, New York, before my fandom's kind of faded, but like there is no soccer team other than USMNT I watch enough to really have working knowledge of and to confidently say, I know how this coach works game in, game out. I've seen the development. I can tell you that track record and how it's going. So I don't have a working knowledge, but I can say that my ideal circumstance is not an MLS coach. And it's not about the league, honestly. It's about sometimes you need to do things differently just to do things differently, right? And I think that it's very, like hiring another MLS coach. I know you're pretty high on Nancy, right? Hiring another crew coach, it just, the optics, I think, and once again, like some of these guys, and I'm not at all close to it, right? Morocco, the guy that they hired, Morocco was like a former national team guy who I don't think had any sort of high profile coaching experience, right? But he was the right guy for Morocco at that time and what they needed, right? I think the right guy for what we need right now is an outsider and somebody who can come in and understands like high level players and can have some sort of aura about them, where it's like guys are like on edge and it's like, oh crap, this guy's our coach. Like, damn, I've heard stuff about this guy. And it doesn't have to be Jurgen Klopp. It's just like Hervé Renard. Like, I've heard about this guy, like I've heard he pushes teams really hard. And like that just in general is going to drive guys in a different way. And I personally want to get out of the old boys network. That's my biggest knock on Trundolo other than the fact that he hasn't coached soccer very long and hasn't coached a team that has to play up to talent. So actually, there's a lot of reasons I don't want Trundle, I guess. But like, but you know, the main is like, I just want to get out of the old boys network. Just stop hiring. Our national team manager does not need to be a formal national team player. And I know that that hasn't been the case for 40 years. I get it, but I just don't want that to be, you know, we just had a former national team guy. We don't need another one. Like, let's go in a different direction. So my MLS averseness is more that I want us to go in a different direction, and I want us to go get somebody with either a big tournament experience, right, which somebody like Renard has, because managing a tournament is different than managing a season. It is, right? And if all you've done is coach, you know, club season-based soccer, you haven't managed tournaments in a way that, you know, there is no redo here, right? We have the World Cup at home, maybe for the only time this century. You never know, right? Maybe it comes back in 2070 something, 80. You know, like, this is it, man. Like, this might be the only one we have in our lifetime. And we cannot afford to say, oh, Trundle will figure it out. He'll learn on the job what he doesn't know, right? This club manager's never managed a big tournament before, but now he's going to manage the biggest tournament in the country's history. So I either want one, somebody who has big tournament experience, because that matters. It's like getting a guy who's been in a quarterback who's been in big games. You know, it's just, it matters. You have to have been there to like live it and learn it. Or if you're not going to get somebody has like big tournament experience World Cup wise, I want somebody who has like just a plethora of European experience, has been all over the place in different environments, learned how to coach different types of players, and who's going to come into our environment and really get in a nuanced way how to push our guys. And maybe they have to figure out the tournament thing, but at least they have like the knowledge of how to, you know, push this group of 20 to 25-year-old guys who need to be pushed.
Yeah, I agree. You know, obviously I keep up with MLS a lot. I'm not a shill for the league. I understand its deficiencies. I've said numerous times the only manager that would be acceptable is Nancy, and it's because of what I've seen him do with a worse team, and I've seen what he can do with talent, and he's done good with both, right? Sharundelo's got several reasons why I wouldn't hire him. You listed a few. He's on a stacked team. He's only been a manager for 2.5 years. I don't want an American coach again. There's just, I want something different. Like you said, just not the traditional. I want something different. I think we need different. I think we need to inject difference into this whole thing, shock the system. And I think that's, you know, shocking the system is what makes people uncomfortable and makes them grow, right? Stop the status quo, do everything differently. And also too, Adam, you don't need to take a risk higher, man. You gotta do someone who's more on the safe side than the risky side, because it could blow up in your face. You don't want to take a chance of hiring someone who's worse than Berhalter. We talked earlier where you said that you think there's like a 10% chance we might hire someone worse than Berhalter. I don't want to have any person who's never done it at that level, because then that 10% is like 50% now. You don't know.
And those 10%, I'm not going to say there's no one internationally that fits in that 10%. There obviously are. I just don't think we would even be considering them. I think the only way we would consider somebody from, you know, who is not an American and who's coaching abroad, the only way we're considering them is if they're good, you know. But we're considering, and I'm interested to hear kind of, you know, what you've learned and what you know here. We're going to consider probably some pretty run-of-the-mill MLS guys just because they're American, or just because they're here, or just because, for a lot of random reasons, right? But like, the standard is so different when it's like, well, we have to get an American. Well, if you have to get an American, you're going to lower the bar because American, you know, managers aren't good. Like, that's just a fact. Like, internationally, American managers are not good managers, right? So
100%.
So that it's like comparing the average Brazilian player to the average American player, right? Like, it's not even a you know, you can get a bad Brazilian player who doesn't make their national team, not bad, but you get a Brazilian player who doesn't make their national team and really isn't particularly close, and they're going to be good for us, i.e. Johnny Cardozo. like that just, it's not a knock on us or them. It's just saying like there's levels to it, and managers the same way, right? Like, if our level of manager is just across the board lower, and you're going to go try and pluck someone, you're going to get a drastically lower level than if you go into the international pool and pull out an international manager.
That's a good point you brought up too about Brazil, because I think of all the nations, They're the number one nation that has the most people that cross over to another national team. Like they've had guys that weren't going to have to play for Brazil, so they're playing for Italy, who are playing
Right.
for Spain, Japan, United States, obviously. There's several players. They're just not good enough for the Brazilian national team, but they're good enough to play on a national team just because there's so much talent. Now,
Right.
I will say this. There's 3 coaches I'd like to have. Jurgen Klopp, we're going to leave him off. I'd love to have him. We're leaving him off. He's
Sure.
just not. He's not. It doesn't seem attainable right now. Okay. The 3 managers that I realistically would want is Yogi Love, former German national team manager, wealth of experience, 15 years as their manager, won a World Cup, speaks English, 62 years old, so he would be good for like at least a 2-year cycle, right? Not too old. Okay. Number 2 would be Renard. He has helped Monaco, or not Monaco, I'm sorry, Morocco and Saudi Arabia not only make the World Cup with 2 smaller nations than the United States, right? But he also got them out of their group, which is
Right.
very impressive. Very
And
impressive.
I believe he's got Africa Cup of Nations success
With Ivory
behind
Coast.
him.
Yes. Yes.
So once again, big tournament experience, big game player, right? As a coach.
He's coached like 5 or 6 national teams, and he's currently the
Right.
women's French national team manager, and they're like the number 2 team in the world.
And and a lot of people are going to look at resumes for guys that they don't know, and you're going to look at like Hervé Renard's resume, and you're going to see some failures along the way, right? That doesn't bother me at all. Like, there's no manager who's not going to have a couple of whiffs. Like, there just aren't. Like, especially that we're going to get for this job. And if that's your worry, like, man, look at this club job. He whiffed and got fired after 8 months, right? Like, well, Trundolo, if he coaches for the next 25 years, is going to have a number of those. You know, like if he gets enough
100%.
experience, he's going to whiff on some. And to me, like the older coaches, especially if they've got, you know, the chops that Renard's got just as an international manager and the success he's had. And if you really look at it, once again, it's like he's never coaching. You and I had this conversation, I think, a day or two ago. Like, he's never coaching the most talented group. And for what we are and what we need to do, we need guys who have experience coaching a group that's not the most talented, because you're going to have to figure out a way to build systems, right, and build effort levels and build all sorts of other, you know, soccer based and team building based things with our team that are going to make up for the fact that no, we don't have a world-class player pool. I get that was the hope 5 years ago, 4 years ago, but we don't. We have a good player pool. We have a player pool that, you know, if it punches above its weight, it could potentially make some noise and get to a quarterfinal, or with the right matchup and the right, you know, night, make a semifinal if things fell the right way. But you've got, like, if you're going with somebody who's never done it before, just as somebody who coached for 15 years, like coaching, right? Like I've coached teams that were really bad for our level in terms of talent, like the worst talent. Finding a way to get the worst talent to play up. In some years for us in league, that meant like winning 5 league games, right? It really did, like some years that I coached. And like we had years where I won 5, 6 league games, and I'm like, that was a great year for us. And people from the outside would look at it and go, oh my God, you were 6 and 10 in league. How's that good? And I'm like, well, I think the average coach wins 3 with that team. Like, I feel good about that, you know? But like having lived that, trying to punch up, like it is so different than I've also lived having the best team. I've lived having the most talent and winning championships. And like, that's easy. Like, that doesn't even challenge you as a coach, honestly, because your good players make up for all your mistakes that you make. And like, when you have bad players, like all your mistakes are highlighted. If you make a mistake, it is glaring, and it is going to lead to losing to Panama because you made a lot of coaching mistakes, and all of a sudden something doesn't go your way, like a red card, and you are not prepared, you know, and I've lived that too. And so I want the guy who's coached, you know, the former scenario that I laid out that I've coached in my life, which is the lower level team. And I've had to figure out a way to manipulate and manage this team to suck the most out of them, you know? And if you've done that, which I think Renard has, and there's a couple other guys we can talk about, if you've done that and lived that, that's going to be the kind of thing that's going to be really valuable to our players. They probably don't even know that as players. They probably think this guy's an ass, right? Oh man, I hate playing for this guy. But at the end of the day, that guy is going to have some things that they're going to bring to the table that at the end of it, 20 years from now, our guys are going to be like, damn, like, I'm glad we played for that dude. Like Jill Ellis on the women's side. I don't know, freaking she's under some controversy right now, thinking San Diego, but like players by all accounts hated her, won 2 back-to-back World Cups. So cool. Hate her all you want. She won 2 World Cups. You won 2 World Cups with her. And sometimes coaches know, like, listen, I might not get to be friends and they might not like me that much after this, but we're going to freaking win.
Yeah. And that's the name of the game, right? You play to win the game. So, yeah, I think Renard would be a good hire. He's done it. He's battle tested. That I think that'd be a good hire. The third guy is Wilfred Nancy because I'm trying to be realistic. I do think that they're going to dip into the MLS realm and try to look at who they could hire. I would be okay with that. That's the only manager that I would accept them hiring is Wilfred Nancy because he is battle tested. He's coached a really bad Montreal team that Thierry Henry left. I don't know if you know this. Thierry Henry was the manager at Montreal, left a shitstorm behind, and Wilfred Nancy cleaned it up and was able to take them to the second place finish in Montreal in his second season. That would be my 3: Yogi Love, Renard, and Wilfred Nancy. Now, here's what I think is going to happen, though, Adam. Here's what I think is going to happen. I don't want this to happen. I think they're going to hire Steve Cherundolo. I think he's going to be the hire. I think that's who they want. I think they're going to try to sell us on his success, right? They're going to say that he is an up-and-comer, that his attacking style is revolutionary from what we've seen, and that that it might be a process, but he's the long-term guy. And that would be such a mistake. That's rolling the dice with him. You could say hiring any manager is rolling the dice, but this is like, it feels like you're playing against the house with this one. You don't have a chance to win. So that's who I honestly, just on conversations I had, I think that's who they'll end up hiring. I hope I'm wrong. I wouldn't be more happy to be wrong about that. But that's who I think they're going to end up hiring, man.
So I haven't put a lot of thought into it yet. To be honest, I haven't allowed myself to get ahead of the game and get over my skis and start really digging in. I know a lot of people have. I've seen a lot of the lists out there. So I'm not too deep into it, but I'll give you a couple other names that are really intriguing to me. One is Pellegrino Matarazzo, right? Liked him last time. I think I don't think he'll get the job. I think he's a total outcast in the U.S. soccer community. He's an total outsider. And I think that he just, for whatever reason, has been a guy who slipped through the cracks a lot. Because, I mean, he has really risen in terms of his, I think, status in German soccer and his notoriety and what he's doing. And he's managed some big clubs, man, and he's had success. And once again, it's not all clean. It never will be. You're right. If you coach long enough, you're going to get fired. It's just how it works. So let's stop looking for the guy who's never been fired. But if you look at what he's done in the last 5-6 years, right, in both locations he's had a lot of experience getting teams to play up to their level, even you could argue above their level in multiple seasons. And he's American, so he's going to have some of the knowledge of the culture, right? He's not going to, because to me, that's the best of both worlds. It's like, who's the guy who gets what our guys are going through? He's been in European soccer. He's got some cachet because guys are like, oh, this dude freaking coach Hoffenheim. Like, this is real deal. This is real deal stuff here. Like, he's not, this isn't like, this isn't the guy fucking coming from, the San Jose earthquake. Like, this is real deal stuff, man. Like, our guy, and it's mean to say that, but like, our guys just aren't going to respect it. Like, I'm sorry. It's not like that is a big thing, right? Is like, you walk in the room and you're Christian Pulisic at AC Milan and you're Weston McKennie. And the big issue is these guys their heads are too big. I agree with that. A lot of people have said that, and I kind of agree. I think our guys kind of think their ish doesn't stink right now. And it's like if they walk in the room and like the Columbus Crew coach is there, and this is maybe unfair, the LAFC coach is there. They just, what's up, man? Oh, Steve, I don't know, man. And maybe you're right. Maybe Nancy will push him. I don't know him well enough, right? But I just think there's something walking in the room, and it's like, crap. This is a dude. This is a dude versus, oh, cool, we hired the guy. Comfort zone, non-comfort zone, right? So that's one, Matarazzo. The other American that kind of has gotten lost in the shuffle that I've always been an advocate for, and he's not the sexiest hire, is David Wagner. Like Wagner, I guess. I don't know, German's Wagner, but
yeah.
I have always thought that he deserves more of a look. You know, he's like, if I'm not mistaken, Klopp protege. I think he took Huddersfield, maybe, like from Championship to English Premier League, right? And then kept them up for a year. Like once again, has he punched up? Yes. Has he been over in Europe and a guy who has some experience that our guys are going to respect? Yes. Right. Like, wish I knew him better as a coach to really know, like, oh, is he a driver? But it's an interesting name. So I'm going to more throw some names at you than actually give you like my hard and fast three. Another name I think is Hugo Perez. Once again, you know, dual nat American, played for the national team, I believe, like has been in our youth coaching system, if I'm not mistaken. Like, and I thought got those El Salvador teams to punch above their weight often. And like those are not very good teams. And like did a really nice job. So wouldn't mind him if you're going to go. And once again, this is all tier 2 stuff, right? I get that there's a whole tier above this. I'm down. I've always said I'm making 50 calls to massive names and just poking and seeing, right? And when those don't work out, I'm coming down to this level. And once again, I'm in charge right now, right? I get that they're probably going to go MLS. Totally get that. I think that your point is, hey, if we're going to go MLS, I like hedging on Nancy, right? And that's the best option. And I think that's a good point that everybody should respect, right? Even if you don't want MLS, if you're realistic, you're like, okay, well, they just might do that. And we could be pissed about it. That's fine. But if they're going to do it, is there an option that's the best, right? And I think, you know it way better than me. And so I trust you on that, right? And if that's the best MLS option, then if and when that comes around, I'll probably take a little bit of a different approach to that hire versus some others. You mentioned the other day, the guy from like Georgia, right? And I not even just specifically him, the guy who led the Georgian national team. Like, who are those guys? Who are the rising stars out there that have led some smaller nations, to really good performances? And are we creative, ambitious enough to go poke around and see, what's that guy like, right? Because that's what a good GM knows the coaching world at all times, right? And the world I know best is basketball, right? And I know athletic directors and GMs in basketball. A big part of their job is not just like who are the players, right? It's who are the coaches. Like if there's a coaching hire I need tomorrow, what's my list? And like, is that list realistic? Is that list robust? Am I digging, kind of like getting players, am I digging under rocks that other people aren't? And so when I say that guy, I love the idea of somebody like that. I, once again, don't know enough about him to actually advocate, but I hope our team of people is like digging, and not just saying, look around MLS. Who's the best, right? Any, meeny, money, mo, pick that guy.
No, I agree. And I'll tell you this. As long as I've been watching MLS, Adam, outside of Bruce Arena, I'm telling you right now, Wilfred Nancy is the best manager I've ever seen in this league. He's a step above everyone else. He's also international. He's French, so he kind of learned the game in a different way than most MLS coaches learn traditionally. So I think that's where he gets a pass, right? Maybe the national team fans will give him a pass because they're like, yeah, he's an MLS coach, but he's not American. He knows a different side of the game than what some of these American coaches know, right? So I think that's a little different, and I think he would be very successful. Now, this is the last thing I want to talk about or bring up before we end the show. What is our timeline? How fast does this hire need to be made? Because obviously you don't want to rush it, but you also don't want to, drag it along for 6 months again and have everybody, checked out and think, damn, are we ever going to hire a manager? Are we just going to roll with the interns for the rest of eternity? What's a realistic timeline? What do you want to see as far as this hiring process?
So now we're at a point, like I've kind of, I've advocated for getting rid of the coach quickly. And a lot of people actually push back. I've seen a lot of accounts out there say, why? There's no rush. There is a rush because right now the coaching pool is as big as it will be until next, whatever, June or May, right? When jobs start all opening up and movement happens. So every single day you wait, somebody's going off the market, right? Might not be who you want, but there are coaches going off the market every single day, right? The market's shrinking. So I think that it needs to happen as the hire doesn't need to happen as quickly as possible. But reaching out, I mean, it needs to be all hands on deck. Everyone, for everyone. What is our list? What is our unattainables? Who's calling those people? Who's reaching out to the manager, to their agents? Who's like all hands on deck? Because that's the first thing that needs to happen, right? And I think in week 1, starting today, hopefully it's already started a little bit. You probably have seen this coming, and hopefully you've started these kind of nudge communications. But first week is like, go after your tier A. Also make calls to your tier B, right? You shouldn't have to go to tier C, so F that, right? So after 1 week, you should know, are there any tier A's that are like mixing with us, right? That we need to go meet with, we need to go sell on the vision, we need to bring in. Okay, cool. Well, let's get them here, right? That should be week 2. Like we're getting a couple of our tier A's and a couple of our top level tier B's, on I call it the on-campus visit, right? As a former basketball coach, but like that, get them on campus, get the interview going, like get players on the phone with them, right? Like this doesn't need to take long. Like all of our players are totally open right now. If that's what you need, if you need players to talk to them and, feel them out, I personally wouldn't even do that, right? We need strong leadership right now. We need somebody to take hold of the ship steer, and we need them to steer us in a direction. And we can have other people have voices, but somebody needs to be the person saying, cool, glad you like him, glad you don't, it's my call, right? 1-2 weeks to get all the communications done, another week or 2 to get your interviews, right? Your finalized interviews once you've cut the pool down and you know who's seriously interested. So 1 month, man, like 1 month, like August. We should have a coach hired in August.
I agree.
And if we don't, then, like all these guys that are open right now need to know immediately that we're interested and that there's at least some interest, and we need to start the process with them so that we're at least in the mix, because they all are reaching out for other jobs. Like all of them, if anybody's open right now, they are in the mix with other jobs. So,
yeah.
And that's the scary thing about how long this took, right? Which we haven't really talked about, but like this took 10 days. And the reason that matters is not just the coaching timing thing, which that's the biggest for me. It's like open it up and start the process before we lose coaches. But it just is very indicative of how this organization, U.S. Soccer, works, right? It feels very corporate. It feels very, it feels like talking to my HR department. It just like there's nobody, and that's just not how Paraguay works. Obviously, it's not how Mexico works. Certainly, like these places, it's like screw the exit interviews, screw this, like F all that. Like you're gone, man. Like that was freaking terrible. You're done. The fan base is roaring it. We all see it. No good. And like we don't have that. We have this slow moving. It's like you got to freaking get everybody's schedules aligned to have a meeting. I don't know. Maybe I'm off on that. Maybe like that's just what it has always felt like to me. And so it's so worrying, though. That's really worrying. Like that's the most worrisome thing, because the ultimate out here, Will, is like, well, MLS season doesn't end for another couple months. So are we in the hiring cycle? Like we're not for MLS, right? We are for the rest of the world. And so that's the worry is the board sitting there going, well, look at all of our top candidates. They're all MLS guys. Cool. Let's give it till the end of the season. See what's up, start talking to them now, but let them play out that season, get an interim in for, the September and October camps. And that would just be freaking terrible, right?
I can't handle that shit, man. I can't handle another interim stint. I can't handle it, man. I can't. Grandfather Dave, or whatever his nickname was,
Grandpa Dave, baby.
18 months as an interim was embarrassing. And then obviously the 7-month shift between Hudson and Callaghan is interim is embarrassing. And I mean, think about this. In the last 6 years, we have had an interim manager as our national team coach for almost 2 years. 2 years.
Crazy. That's crazy.
2 years. No other nation would do that. And yeah, I
It's, wa-
agree.
it's, wa- it's wasted time, right? I mean,
It
it's
is
wasted
wasted
time.
time. Yeah, it is wasted time. And there's just it makes it has a at least there's more questions than answers with that. It makes you question a lot of things. I agree with you on your timeline though. August, I'd say about 3 weeks, right? From today, three
Right.
weeks is August 1st. You get a week to narrow your list down, you get a week to interview people, and then you get a week to make your decision. It shouldn't take longer than that. It
No,
shouldn't take
it
longer than that.
shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we talked about this with college coaches, right? When Alabama hired their new coach, DeBoer, I think is his last name, from Washington, they hired him in 2 days. Now, I'm not saying we got to move that quick, right? That kind of turnaround, but don't tell me you can't hire someone in
For
3 weeks,
sure. Oh yeah.
right? I mean, that's plenty of time to vet someone and know who you want. And, I think that what's going to happen, they do hire an MLS manager. They're not going to come right away. They're going to say,
I
yeah,
agree.
we've come
I
to an
agree.
agreement with Wilfred Nancy. He's going to take over January 1st as the manager. So he's really only going to have 18 months as the manager, not 2 years.
Right.
Which I don't really like that either. I would really like my manager to get in there as soon as possible, play with these friendlies that we're going to have, these BS friendlies against Mexico in October.
Those are perfect times to start implementing system and get to know your guys. That's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of people will poo-poo that as well and be like, well, you're overreacting. It's just a cut. It's like, dude, man, like, whoever this person is has already been, their tenure's already, this new coach, it's already been shortened by 2 years, right? Which is okay. That's fine. You can figure it out. But like, let's not take a couple camps away from them if possible. Like, it's totally feasible to go get a coach. And screw the wait till the end of your season. Do you want to be like, okay, Nancy, you're our guy. Do you want to be the national team coach? Because the job starts next week.
Yeah.
You good or no? No, I'm not good. Cool. Like, once again, just have some standards, right? Like, we're a better job than the Columbus Crew, dude. Like,
we are. No, we are. And we have to start acting like we are. That's the problem. There's a lot of, we just don't act like we're serious. That's just what it comes down to, right?
Sure.
We act amateur, like it's a bush league still. Like, yeah, we might keep Berhalter, we might not. We'll make that decision next week. Like, what do you mean next week? We know what we know. What else do you have to possibly? What is an exit interview going to tell you?
It was 100%, right? Vacation. Like, I am convinced of it. I'm convinced that everyone on the board had July 4th to July 7th, going to Lake House, going here, going to Cabo, going to, like, without a doubt. And it was like, well, we just can't be bothered to figure this out and to, like, make this urgent. We'll figure it out next week. That's literally it. I would bet so much money on it that it wasn't like, oh, they're indecisive. It was literally just like, this isn't that important to, like, break off our holiday plans. And that's sad to us, right? Because it was important enough for all of us to be super engaged through our holiday weekends and care enough to, like, I don't know, like, it just checking my phone more than normal, dude. I really was. Like, it was like, when is it going to drop? When is it going to drop? Like, daily. It's crazy. I mean, and I'm actually, like, relieved that I don't freaking need to, like, check my phone as much. And
no, exactly. Except when the hiring process eventually ramps up. Well, Adam, let me ask you this: any closing thoughts about what we talked about a lot today? Obviously, Berhalter's fired. The coaching process starts now. Any closing thoughts about what happened today?
At the end of the day, I'm going to be hopeful, and you're going to have to. I'm not saying that I, don't have a lot of skepticism. I do. But I'm just going to be hopeful. I'm going to continue to be hopeful because at the end of the day, I can't really, I'm not in control, man. Like, I'm just not. And, like, I can Crocker out all I want. Crocker's not going to get fired because we Crocker out. He just isn't. Like, he'll get fired because this next coach doesn't do a good job, right? Like, at the end of the day, so I'm going to start to save some of my energy for just being hopeful that we do the right thing. Don't have a lot of confidence, but like, we're in a moment of hope, right? Like, the old era is now behind us. We've got, the world is our oyster, and it all might blow up with a really bad coaching hire in a month. But today, we can be hopeful. That's what I'm going to leave you guys with.
100%. Hey, make sure you follow Adam at Stan USMNT. It's his @ name on the screen, which you see. Adam, it's always a pleasure to have you, my friend. We'll be talking numerous times, and I can't wait to see who we we end up hiring. Until next time, I'll see you all soon.